Hello everyone, this is Susanna and I have Carol next to me, and don't mind us as we flip through between the Join Me and our PowerPoint. So just to begin, I want to take a minute just to introduce our author team. The team consists of a variety of educators from the classroom and FSL instructional coaches from across the province. We also have our two senior advisors, Christine Reese, FSL consultant, and Dan Crandall, who is online, I believe, as well. And then we have our specialist teams, Denis Cousino for the CEFR, Katie Arnett for the assessment and differentiation, and Maureen Smith, who also had a hand in the CEFR angle. To begin, we just wanted to ask a question, and you can type your responses in the chat box. And the question is, qu'est-ce que vous cherchez dans une ressource? And you can just start by typing in whatever you're looking for in your ideal resource. Okay, so just to move on, and you can keep typing as we go along. The Mon Réseau Ma Vie is divided into 4 modules. The ones on the screen right now are the grade 7 resources. There's 4 modules for each grade, and in each module you have a student e-text, and then you have a teacher's e-guide. We're going to do a quick walkthrough of the e-text and e-guide just before we get into some of the other aspects of the resource. One of the greatest assets to the resource is the digital access to text, audio, video, language demos, and slides, and more. And if you go in and access your Pearson resources, once you log in, you'll see at this left-hand side basket the 4 resources or the 4 modules that you have access to. Just for today, I'm clicking on the On est capable resource as our point of example. So once you click on it, the resource will pop up, and you have the option to navigate through the e-text either using the basket, and if you use the basket, it'll go through and it'll give you each of the pages that are in the student text. That's what we're looking at right now. As you go through, you have the guide de démarrage, and there is some instructions in terms of using the e-guide and some acknowledgement, and then using the e-text on a tablet, because some of the features are a little bit different just because of how tablets function. Also through the basket, you have access to the entire program overview, the teaching notes, and the fiche. So this is one option that you have. The other option that I love is actually the little icons that you find on the spreads that give you direct access to each of these components. So in an opening spread, like this one that you see in front of you, you have the 3 task choices. Oops, I'm trying to scroll down, it's not letting me. Here we go. You have the 3 task choices, but then you'll see at the very top, if it'll allow me to do this, go away. Sorry, there we go. Okay, there's an umbrella. Once you click on that umbrella, it'll jump you straight into the program overview. So you don't even have to use the baskets at the side, and it's taking a little bit of time to get there, but it will get there. And then you get your module overview. And we're going to take a look at the module overview a little bit later throughout the slideshow. But the module overview is really an important aspect to sort of look at, because it lays out the CFR links. It also lays out your assessment points and your assessment plan for that particular module. So I'm just going to jump back. The other aspect is going into the text. So this is an example, I'm just going to the next page, of one of the texts that's found in the student guide. And you'll see in the middle here, there's all these little icons. Each text spread will have these basic icons. So this first 2 icons here, this is letting you know that there is a listening audio that actually goes with that spread. And if you click on it, it'll pop up. Along with each of the audios, There's also the fiche. So I'm going to skip some of those icons. But at the bottom here is where you would get each of the fiches that go with those listening activities. And they're all there for you. So fiche 1 would have went with the first listening activity. Fiche 2 would have went with the second. And then we'll pop back in. And the other icon here is an activité interactive. So the activité interactive is just more enforcement of the language function that is going on in that particular text. And so if we click on that one, and this will explore further through the PowerPoint. I just wanted to give us a 101. So it's an interactive one that we sort of pop in there with the kids, and that's projectable. The other aspect that you can click right into is la démonstration langagière, and then that's where we get into some grammar context that's embedded within the text spread. So all of the grammar within Mon Réseau Ma Vie is always embedded within the context and the language function that's being delivered. The other really handy tool in terms of being in the classroom is the notes. This is the teacher's guide, and once you click on notes, it links you directly to the 3 lessons that are attached to that text. So you could download the teacher's guide and then try and find the pages, or you could just click right on that icon and it'll bring you to exactly where you need to be. So it's very handy and very quick in terms of navigating when you're on the stage, so to speak. The last one that comes with each of the text spreads is les diapos. And this is a huge time saver because embedded are already the slides that you would need to support that text. And there is one example of the diapo that were already created. So here is some success criteria. This next one. Goodness. There we go. This next one is scaffolding some language for them to use in terms of conversation interactions within the classroom and so on. So that's sort of like a quick overview before we get into the nitty-gritty of the resource. There's also a couple other icons that we'll see along the way. There's a video icon. It's not attached to this spread, but if I jump over to page 18, this icon here shows you that there's some sort of language video that goes with it. And the great thing about these videos is that you have control over slowing down the language with the speed and also adding in a transcript. So it could be differentiated and scaffolded to support the students in your class, depending on what level they're at or what supports they need. If I adjust the speed, and there's just a quick example. So lots of quick time-saving tools that for a core French teacher come very much in handy. The other piece that I just want to quickly review is the layout of the lesson template. So these are examples of the lesson templates. All of the lessons are structured in order to start off with a minds on, then the action in terms of the learning, and then a consolidation of the learning. The learning goals are all outlined in English and en français aussi. There's some examples of success criteria as suggestions. You might add your own or you might take away some. And then it also provides that communication focus for the lesson. It also gives you a heads up as to which lesson you're going to find assessment for, assessment of, and assessment as learning. In this case, the 3 lesson series, we're going to be hitting on assessment for learning. As you go through, there are margin boxes all throughout that lets you know these are the materials that you're going to be needing. There's also scaffolded language for the teacher. And also what you will find is other margin boxes that gives tips for differentiation or teaching tips, and also lets you know which fiche to tap into. So these are all throughout, and we'll look a little bit more closely at them as we go through the presentation. So I'm just going to click back here. So the other huge benefit of this resource is that it actually touches on the development of 3 main goals, and it's the achievement of student confidence, student proficiency, and student achievement. And the 3 goals are guided by another 3 principles that are embedded all throughout the program. The idea that the tasks are function-driven and action-oriented, and there's direct links to the CFR. Students are given many opportunities to use and reuse language, and it's all through the use of oral communication skills. And the activities, tasks, and all the lessons correspond to the curriculums all across Canada. So we're going to take a minute and start looking more specifically at some of the texts and the audios that come up throughout the series. So student confidence is a key factor in any core French classroom because it's through confidence that you get student engagement. And in Mon Réseau Ma Vie, students are offered a variety of purposeful language and learning situations in order to facilitate that spontaneous conversation and in order to develop student confidence and ease within their interactions. Each module is centered upon a group of language functions where grammar is taught in context. So when we talk about language functions, it links back to the CFR or the CECR and the idea of an acteur social. The language function really is about students are using words and phrases and they're putting those together in order to achieve this acte de parole. So I'm introducing some vocabulary and phrases in order for them to negotiate, in order for them pour discuter, or pour faire un choix, or peut-être pour expliquer. And they're going to see that language used and reused and spiraled through authentic listening, speaking, reading, and writing activities. So the competencies are developed gradually. Often what you will see is that in each module in partie A, you're going to see that it's grounded in an oral context. And with the other modules, you start to see the spiraling in of reading and writing. Each of the parties focuses on the development of at least 2 of those competencies, whether it's listening and speaking, or listening, speaking with a reading, or a reading and a writing. But there's always 2 that are targeted in terms of assessment of learning. What you're seeing here is an example of a student response to an oral activity. And I'm just going to jump out of the PowerPoint for a second. The Mon Réseau Ma Vie offers a wide variety of, I need to find where I am. You can't do 2 things at once sometimes. 1 second. There we go. Offers a wide variety of oral texts in video form and in audio form. And that, for me as a classroom teacher, is a huge benefit because that is where I often struggle in terms of finding the appropriate audio for my students at that grade level. And responses to the text don't always relate to just, here's some questions, now answer the questions. They often relate to, you know, who is speaking and what words are they using to speak. So it touches upon some comprehension, but it also touches upon the development of social linguistics and pragmatic competencies. So I wanted to go to, right, 1 second. So if we go back to this text spread here, as I mentioned before, you have 2 adjoining audio text activities that student listens to. The students are also, and you as a teacher, are also able to have an audio version of this text. So if they click on the speaker, there we go. It will play or it will read what is on the spread. Then, click out of this, there we go. Once you click out of that, you get your listening activities. So the one listening activity that I was showing on the PowerPoint, it's asking to identify who's the speaker, what activity they're liking, and why they like it. So it's touching on not just did they say this, did they say that, but also the message that they are saying. Another type of activity can be found based on this spread. I'm just going to jump here. So here's another spread, and here's where you get an example of a video audio text. And I'm just going to play a couple seconds of this one for you.
Bonjour et bienvenue à notre émission. C'est Stéphanie au micro. Aujourd'hui, nous parlons de personnes exceptionnelles. Qui vous inspire? Appelez-moi et présentez-moi votre héros, héroïne.
So again, with any of the videos, you're able to adjust the speed, and you have the option of adding in the transcript so that it's supported with the French language on the screen. And then if we go to the bottom here, you get the student activities that are linked to that particular listening activity, or the different, you get the listen activities or any of the activities that are linked to that lesson. One of the things I wanted to point out is any of the audios that you find, they are linked to the CFR A1+ level. So you will find that the characteristics of the audio is often very slow-paced and very clear to align with where our students should be within les niveaux du CECF. And I'm just going to pass off now to Carol, who's going to go over some of the written text that can be found within Mon Réseau Ma Vie.
So within the resource, there's a variety of texts that can be found, which allows for more student interest and engagement. There are text messages, online conversations, websites, graphic text, informational text such as blogs, menus, and quizzes and surveys. And it's all up-to-date, current content, relevant to students, which is very important because, as we know, that promotes student interest and engagement. And many of the texts that we find in the resource, that you'll find in the resource, also offer accompanying audio and digital supports as well. So it's very visually appealing and lots of text types for the students. So we're just going to go in and take a look in the guide. Okay, so this is an example of a text. It was a personal survey to determine the ideal pastime, and it's got questions for the students to answer orally, and it's visually appealing, and all of the texts are laid out with different activities to do and questions and answers that aren't just, they're not written, it's based in the oral, which is fantastic. And here's an example of an invitation through text. So they're taking a look at a text, and then you can see that there's a box that talks about any of the vocabulary they would need for texting. So what we also see is that you have the blog, and you see the poster, les affiches, and within it there's also the cultural boxes. So if you see, they're linking the culture boxes, they're putting the culture boxes in and linking it throughout the resource. Okay. So one of the things we want to draw upon with a variety of texts is that the responses to the text go beyond just comprehension. There's many activities that allow the students to respond to text through text form and audience. So it's not just about reading the text and then answering the question, but actually taking a look at text form. And there's a lot of, if you look at previewing the text, there's teaching tips and sentence starters and questions that you can ask your students. And it's not just literal comprehension questions, but there's a lot of good conversation that can be taken from the questions that are in the guide to help you spark communication with your students.
The questions also relate to audience, so and how do we get the assessment for that within the class and what types of questions we need. So you'll see here, there's c'est quel type de texte, est-ce que ce sont des commentaires, and then when you come down, it's qui pose la question, so who's speaking and who are the responders. So it's another important element that forms part of our curriculum as well.
And then with the text, there's the option, as Susanna had said earlier, you can do the read aloud, or you can do the e-text, or you can do both. So there's many options to work with the text over and over to help build student confidence as well. It's also a good, so we're going to go back in to, okay. So the other thing is too, there's notes which you can work with for the language opportunities. You can connect the linguistic awareness or the social linguistic, the pragmatic. It's all in there and it's pointed out. So with the tips, yeah. So links, using the strategies. There's lots of notes throughout the guide that help the teacher to deliver the different activities with the class. Okay. I'm just going to go over to the student guide, the activities that we find. So here's an example of an activity where they take it out of a cup. It's questions in a cup. And these are questions that the students would ask the other students in the group, and it promotes oral discussion. So they take the text and then they're working with these questions orally. So it's not just written answers, it's oral answers and discussion with the students. Okay. Then we come back to the culture. As I mentioned earlier, the culture boxes are embedded throughout the resource, and they're linked to the curriculum, and they're student-centered. So this helps the students to develop student engagement and confidence, and it's the confidence that they need to become an acteur social. So they're constantly seeing the language repeated throughout, the culture is embedded, and it's just spiraled throughout so that they become more and more confident users of the language. And that's how the activities are set up to help promote the language within. So culture is embedded within the different tasks and texts. Okay, so so there you can see. The other thing is too, there's a lot of check-in points. So here's an example of a cultural response where it's an assessment as learning, and it links to culture, but it also links to self-reflection. So they're thinking of the culture that they're learning about, but they're also reflecting and thinking about how their culture relates to it. It's a great use of assessment as learning. Okay. There's also assessment for learning, which is embedded throughout as well, and it's indicated in the teacher's guide. So there we go, assessment. Within the teacher's guide, there's assessment for learning, as we said, assessment as learning, and assessment of learning. And as you're going through in the teacher's guide, it'll tell you that when an activity is needed for final assessment. So as you're going through the learning, it'll give you a heads up that this activity will be needed in the final assessment. So the learning checks as well. There's a learning check. It tells you, it explains to the teacher how you can check in with your students. There's models of the language structures. Again, you can see some teaching tips on the left-hand side, the use of strategies.
Okay, so I'm going to jump back in. There we go. We're going to talk a little bit about the development of student proficiency, which is one of our main goals in the class. And the student confidence comes with the types of texts that are being presented and the types of activities that are being used in order to get the students to use and reuse language. And as they use and reuse language throughout, they begin to develop this proficiency. And proficiency throughout Mon Réseau Ma Vie is developed in a variety of ways. One of the ways is through the types of tasks that are presented. So at the beginning, when I was showing you the beginning of the spread of each module, you see an outline of 3 contexts. Each of these contexts is asking students to use language for a purpose. So in this case, the students, ils vont inviter. And this next one, il faut choisir quelque chose. And in the troisième, il faut faire un choix. Et puis expliquer le choix. So in terms of us as teachers, I'm going to reiterate again, the importance of this little umbrella that provides the module overview, really, really important to dive into that and to understand it and to see where the links are being made and the types of activities that are being used in order to engage our students and prepare them for those final assessment of learning tasks. We've already touched upon this next point that we're going to talk about, which is developing student proficiency through sound instructional practice. With the teams of expert advisors that we have, specifically there's Dr. Katie Arnett, who added teaching tips in order for us to respond to the needs of a variety of students in our class. There's text boxes for differentiation. There's also text boxes that have suggestions in terms of how do you support a student, or perhaps you have some high flyers in your class, which we often see, and how do you challenge them a little bit more. So there's lots of opportunity for differentiating any of the activities that you find throughout the teacher's guide. The other really unique piece of the modules and of the resource itself is the use of a variety of activities. Sometimes students think that they're games, but they're very purposeful in how we use them. So this is a listing of the different types of activities that we see. Sometimes it'll say, you know, using appointment clock partners or using the decks of cards strategies. The great thing and the important thing to note is that all of those are actually outlined. So in the program overview, you will find a description of each one of those activities. So although in the teacher's guide it might just make a reference to appointment clock, you can then come to page 43 of the program overview and you'll find a detailed description of each one of those. So again, that's why it's really important to become familiar with that program overview while you're going through the resource. Okay. The other useful aspect of the resource is how the lessons are laid out for teachers in the lesson plan. So the process of gradual release is really, really highlighted and evident throughout. You will see that next to each part of a lesson, you'll see an M, and then it'll go through, and then you'll see an SP at some point, a GP, etc. So that's modeled, shared practice, guided practice, and independent practice. So it outlines very specifically the process of gradual release. And then it also offers, when we go back to things like the diapo, it provides you the models that support you in getting students to become more spontaneous through that gradual release process. So this is one of the ones that we saw before. It's scaffolding students and being able to have that conversation. So very useful tools and time-saving tools for us as teachers. One of the last aspects that you will find in in all of the lesson plans is this reference to strategies. As you know, within the Ontario context, and I'm sure within all of the curriculum, language learning strategies are a huge component of second language development. So Mon Réseau Ma Vie recognizes this and identifies within the student guide strategies to be used before, during, and after an activity. Throughout each of the lessons, teachers are also prompted, and I'm hoping that I can find one that has a strategy on it, but usually there is a text box, and of course this one that I have open doesn't have it. Oh, there we go. So here's an example. When there's a point that students need to specifically identify a strategy or use a strategy, teachers are prompted to, remind the students of the different purposes of reading. And then you can even go back into the student guide and even make those more visual. Oftentimes what I've done is I'll pull some of the specific ones and I'll use them as anchor charts and refer to them explicitly within the classroom, because as you know, if you don't refer to them explicitly, they won't become internalized by our students. So Mon Réseau Ma Vie, the process of the gradual release recognizes the importance of that. Now, one of my favorite aspects, and I sort of talked about it a little bit, but I'm going to take a few seconds to talk about it even more, is the diapo. So you see this, I don't know if it's yes. So this light bulb is your démonstration langagière. Oftentimes the question is asked, well, how do we embed the grammar? So the grammar is always introduced within the context of that text spread, and these are little videos that actually provide a brief language tutorial on language patterns. So I'm going to show very briefly this one here, and not all of it, but just to give you a sense of what you'll see.
Voici des explications pour t'aider. Même être un acteur. C'est une phrase affirmative. Je n'aime pas être à l'extérieur. C'est une phrase négative. Qu'est-ce que tu remarques? Cindy adore nager. C'est une phrase affirmative. Ayane, elle n'aime pas nager. C'est une phrase négative. Qu'est-ce que tu remarques?
So the little language videos doesn't teach grammar in terms of, elle aime, il aime, j'aime, je n'aime pas. It teaches it within a context, and it's asking students, inviting students to share what they're noticing in the patterns that are being presented. And noticing language is the way that grammar is often approached within the Mon Réseau Ma Vie. So it's notice it within the context that it's being taught. What are the things that you're noticing? Let's share those patterns. And then there's some tips in terms of some explicit instruction for the students that have that sort of analytic type of thinking and want to know more.
Which brings us to our last point, which is student achievement. And what's really nice about the resources, there are many, many opportunities, as we've said, for, as we've seen throughout, for assessment for, assessment as, and assessment of learning. And there is an assessment plan in the teacher's resource, like at the beginning in the guide, which you can view as well. But there are sheets, fiches d'évaluation, that the students can use, and there's an example on your screen from the resource for the students to use to reflect on their learning. There's grille d'observation, which the teachers can use to assess where their students are at. And they're given multiple opportunities throughout the resource to use these and to reflect on their learning and to help them spiral their learning and achieve higher results. As we mentioned earlier too, the principles of differentiation are observed and they're in the margin boxes throughout, which also helps the teacher and the students. And at the beginning of each module, as we noticed earlier on the teacher side, the success criteria is there, and it's laid out so that the teacher and the students work together to create a success criteria. The teachers are encouraged to use that success criteria along with the students to help them achieve success. And as we know, when success criteria is co-created, the kids feel a sense of ownership, and it just helps them to feel more successful as they're going. They understand what is being assessed. And as Susanna had showed you earlier, the à trois, in each module, there's an à trois, or there's an option for a couple of choices. And this is the assessment of learning tasks for specific skills. It's at the end of each context, and it demonstrates the degree of the learning for each skill, and the students can choose which one they want to do, or there's one provided, and it's a summary of everything they've done, the language skills they've learned, and then it's their opportunity to show what degree they've learned each skill at. One of the things too is in the guide there's learning centers that are set up. So as you're going through in the teacher's guide, they're in the teaching tips. So we're just going to get to an example. Okay, so they're at the end, just before they're about to do their assessment of learning, there's centers. So as you can see here in the teacher's guide, there's a description of each center, and in the teaching tips throughout, it gives tips, and it says, let you know that this activity is going to be used in the centers at the end before they do their assessment of learning. So there's a variety of activities set up, again, to reinforce the language that the students have learned and to build that confidence before they actually go to do the final à trois assessment. And there's tips as well that, for example, there's for the teacher who is on the cart, because there are some teachers who are fortunate enough to have their own classroom and other teachers who are on a cart. Here's a teaching tip for the teachers without a classroom and how to set up centers. So I won't read it, but I'll let you just quickly look through it. But these are embedded throughout as well to help the teachers, the intern FSL teachers on a cart who don't have a classroom. So this is all embedded in the resource, which is fantastic. And then the last point that I'd like to talk about is les outils de référence. So in each student module, at the end, there are support tools. There's a dictionnaire visuel, and what the student can do is, or the teacher, we're just going to get there. Okay, so here's the dictionnaire visuel. So as you'll notice, there's no English. What it is they're explaining it in French, or they're providing some pictures as well, some visuals. But it's a list of words that they've come across, that they may have come across, or they came across throughout the module that they might need to help them. So it's a great resource, and then it's also at the end for the teachers in the teacher's guide. It's listed, and it's from A all the way to Z for all of the modules as well. So it's embedded within the student text, but it's also found, there's a glossaire where the glossaire is A all the way to Z. If you click on it, or student, yeah, you're using it with your student, it'll pull it up, and all the words are there as well. So this is a great feature to tap into. Good. As you can see in front of you as well, in the student text, there is a pour communiquer section, which lists the language structures that the students would need, and which you build through the modules, but it will build their language, and it's the language structures that they would use throughout module A, B, and C, which will then in turn help them when they are doing their final assessment.
So in this case, for the pour communiquer, what you're seeing is that these are the actes de parole from the CFR, and then there's some examples that they've learned through the learning cycle. So it becomes a quick at a glance for the students as they're working for the assessment of learning tasks, which is on the adjacent page. Okay, so we want to leave a little bit of time to be able to respond to some questions, but just in terms of summarizing the Mon Réseau Ma Vie, it is a very strong resource in terms of linking with the aspects of the CFR. The skills range between a niveau A1 plus to an A2, so it's language appropriate for the grade 7s and 8s. The tasks are authentic, but not just authentic in terms of being set in real life. They are action-oriented. So the students need to use language in order to apply some sort of problem-solving skill, whether they are deciding or choosing or negotiating. There's some sort of higher order thinking, inquiry skill that they need to use through language. There's a variety of literacies that are tapped into. You see a variety of text coming out through the 4 competencies of listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And again, they are authentic to the world and the domain of our students. They are what they need as an A1 learner to be able to survive within their environment. So they may not be long paragraph text, but they are schedules and emails and courriel. There are, in terms of the text, there's also comics or graphic text that each of the modules and the parties they have. And sometimes, you might look at it and think, wow, this language is kind of tough, but it's about teaching them to use reading strategies in order to grab the gist. And oftentimes those graphic texts revolve around a scenario that would foreseeably happen in their lives. So then again, we're tapping into student interest.
And relevance as well.
And relevance. There's the integration of culture, where we saw the culture boxes coming in, and it links back to curriculum. And then the important aspect of making sure that there's an entry point for all the students with the variety of needs that we often come across in a core French classroom. And at the center of that, again, our students are acting comme des acteurs sociaux.